For 400 years after slave ships made their first journey from Africa to the American colonies, our next guests are putting a spotlight on the consequences that still resonate to this very day, and we're celebrating the unsung contributions of Black Americans and talking about ways to correct a really shameful history. Please welcome the creator of the New York Times Magazine's 1619 Project, Nikole Hannah-Jones, and the star of ABC series Station 19, Boris Kodjoe. So, Boris.
Yes.
Welcome to The View.
Thank you.
And last December, you and a group of business folks and celebrities like Idris Elba and Anthony Anderson took a trip to Ghana as part of your Full Circle Festival. Tell us what that means and why, and what this is all heading towards. What are you pointing towards?
Well, first of all, I think the rest of the world, especially here in the United States, doesn't get a positive visual representation of Africa, right? All we hear about here and all we associate Africa with is famine, war, diseased children, and mass exodus to Europe due to decades of one-dimensional media coverage. And we wanted to change that narrative, right? We wanted to show people the vibrancy and the diversity in Africa, the beautiful people, the food, the music, the nightlife, the historic sites. So we brought 100 people over there, our friends, to experience Accra, Ghana, to go to the slave castles, to have parties on the beach, to go out at night, to mingle, to collaborate with people, to have that exchange that's so necessary. And it was a profoundly transformative experience for every single person that went. So we realized that we need to make this available to everybody. There's 400 million people of African descent living outside of the continent. And every single person needs to go to Africa to experience that.
Wow, wow. You mentioned that you saw the slave castle and the slave cells in Ghana where Africans were sold and then, of course, sent to the slave ships. What was that like for you, that experience?
You know, I've been many times now. My father is from Ghana, so I've been as a boy, and I took my children, and I took my wife, Nikole, and every time you go, it's a visceral, it's such an emotional experience because you feel the spirit of those who were in these dungeons and who went through all these atrocities that we know about. And you know, it's really amazing when you get a chance to reconnect with your roots because you realize that you're not descendants of slaves. No. You're descendants of enslaved Africans, which is a big difference. We are the descendants of survivors. Right? So understanding that helps you reclaim your cultural identity, which is so important, especially for African Americans. And once you understand where you came from, you have a better idea of where you're going. So it's really transformational.
I want to thank you, both of you, because I don't think we can really move forward until we fully understand how this country began.
Absolutely.
And you have done such a good job with your project recently, 1619. It's if you haven't read it, please do. I did last night for hours. It is the entire New York Times Magazine. You understand that America really did begin in 1619. And their essays, artwork, I mean, it really does. I will never understand, but it taught me so much. I had tears going to sleep, and I woke up this morning telling my husband about it, and I said, everyone needs to learn.
She's been saying, we got to go to Ghana.
I know.
We gotta go to Ghana.
Ghana's beautiful from the video I watched. Why did you want to do that? And what was the New York Times reaction when you said, not just a page, I want the entire magazine to be this?
I wanted to do that because I first came across the date 1619 in high school, and it was a book by historian Lerone Bennett called Before the Mayflower. And every American has heard about the Mayflower, which lands in 1620, but almost no Americans had heard about the White Lion, which landed in 1619, because one story was about freedom, which we love, and the other story was about slavery, which we don't. And I felt that slavery is just as foundational to America's any ship or anything that happened after that. It becomes foundational to our economic, political, cultural, and legal systems, but it's treated as marginal because it's a history that doesn't glorify the United States, and so we're very uncomfortable with it. So realizing that the 400th anniversary was approaching, and that this anniversary was likely going to pass in most households with no notice, no acknowledgement. It just seemed like a tremendous opportunity to not just talk about the past, but to show the ways that all across American life today, we are still living with that legacy. And when I suggested it to the Times, honestly, I made the pitch that this anniversary is coming. None of you have heard of it either. And that we were going to show that in all these areas that you don't think, you know, traffic in Atlanta, capitalism, democracy itself, why we don't have universal health care, all of these things, we were going to show that you could trace them back to slavery. My editors at the Times immediately said, let's do it. And the project actually kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger because we realized 400 years to assess something so foundational, it had to be something really big.
Sonny, I love what she said. She said, we didn't have a democracy until Black America made it a democracy.
Yes.
Yeah.
No
That's
question.
when it was real.
Yeah, and it's something we talk about all the time. Abby and I talk about. Nikole, and I loved this project so much. I mean, I was trying to get that magazine, more and more copies of the magazine. It was sold out everywhere. You couldn't even get it. One of the points you make with this project, as you just alluded to, is that as a country, we are a country founded on both an ideal and a lie. And 1619 is just as important to the story of America as year 1776.
Absolutely.
Why?
That's the year of the compromise.
Yeah.
That's the year of the
Exactly.
compromise because it
Why?
was all laid out.
Yeah.
And if they had stuck to it, but politics came in,
Yeah.
and when you're marginalized, you become the thing that people can give up. You know, and they said,
That's
well,
right.
we'll get to this. But, you know, you can't. Slavery wasn't the thing you wanted to push to the side.
Yeah.
It just really wasn't. And to your point, it does affect everything. And, you know,
Everything.
why people feel the way they feel. I mean, it's an extraordinary piece, but an extraordinary piece for Americans to
Yes.
connect to today.
Yeah.
So they understand, you know, this isn't a Black problem, this isn't a white problem, this is an American problem.
American.
Absolutely.
American
Exactly,
problem.
and that
So
comes
it
across
makes
so
it-
much.
yeah.
One of the questions that I ask every single presidential candidate that has come here, and I've gotten flack for it, but I talk about reparations. And this summer there was a congressional hearing on reparations. Will it happen?
Do you want to take that?
Well, I think that any dialogue about reparations has to start with the recognizing of the crime, recognizing of the facts, recognizing that it actually happens, right? The fact that enslaved Africans were brutalized, were put to work in order to create a huge fortune for those who benefited from the slave trade, which was a systematic mechanism, right? That was the foundation of the disproportionate generational wealth that we have today.
Right.
That's it.
So when people say, well, you know, hundreds of years ago, I wasn't alive, it's very important to make the distinction, say, look, you weren't alive, but yes, you benefit from
That's it. That's
the
it.
foundation that was laid hundreds of years ago.
And other people don't.
We're
And
gonna.
other people suffer from the effects of
You
slavery.
have to come back and chronicle this with us, and you have to come back
Love to.
to the next trip.
Absolutely.
Our thanks to Nikole Hannah-Jones and Boris Kodjoe. Boris' show, Station 19, will return January 23rd right here on ABC.